I'm going to bring in former Assistant U.S. Attorney David Katz. He's going to talk more about tomorrow's big testimony coming from Michael Cohen. He's an admitted liar. He has lied even before Congress. Is the jury going to believe what he says?
Well, it's going to be an uphill battle to try to convict Trump of the felony. I believe that his testimony, Michael Cohen's, is not essential to show that Trump authorized, approved the falsification of the records, but he had, in order for it to be bumped up to a felony, it had to be done with a specific intent, which was basically to violate either state or federal campaign laws. And Michael Cohen's going to say, I told him directly that that was so, but he's going to be perhaps disbelieved when Michael Cohen says that.
Okay, so that's big, because I've heard a lot of people saying that they think the prosecution is really relying on Michael Cohen's testimony. You're saying just to have it elevated. Is that right?
Yes. And there are things that corroborate the fact that there were meetings and that there were records. For instance, the testimony about Weisselberg and how he wrote a note which supports that the records were falsified. There's going to be no doubt the records were falsified. The DA did a great job on that. But whether Trump approved them, I think they can show that. That's the misdemeanor. But if they can't show that beyond a reasonable doubt, he'll either have a hung jury or actually be acquitted of the felony Trump, I believe, may be.
And although we don't have cameras in the courtroom and we just have these readouts of the audio and the sketches, of course, there's sort of this parallel trial going on here in the public eye, isn't there? We've got Michael Cohen. I've got some video that I want to show our viewers right now of him on social media. He's wearing a T-shirt. Some of this has been taken down, but wearing a T-shirt with Donald Trump behind bars. The judge has even stepped in and told the prosecution, you need to relay to him that he's got to knock it off. Meanwhile, though, you have President Trump, who even at his campaign rally in New Jersey yesterday, he has 100,000 people out there while he's, chatting with everybody. Very often, he does try to talk about things that are in the news. This is clearly in the news, and he's not able to say anything because of his gag order. Do you feel like this is fair, that this has been playing out this way?
I think that the judge made a mistake. I think as to the jurors and as to witnesses who are not involved, that was the correct order. But I think he didn't really think through that issuing a gag order to the defendant, who's presumed innocent, when he cannot gag witnesses like Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen, who are making hay of their criticism and animosity toward Trump, I think that was unfair. I don't think legally it's reversible error, because at the end of the day, the jurors, although they're not sequestered, are ordered not to consider it. But at the same time, it comes across as being unfair in the court of public opinion.
Yeah, it's hard to unhear things, I mean, we are humans, aren't we? All these jurors are humans. I want us to take a listen to Michael Cohen, because it may give us an idea of the type of tone that we'll hear from him this week. Let's listen.
I am ashamed of my weakness and my misplaced loyalty, of the things I did for Mr. Trump in an effort to protect and promote him. I am ashamed that I chose to take part in concealing Mr. Trump's illicit acts rather than listening to my own conscience.
The guy, of course, who used to go to bat for him every single time. He was the fixer, right? He wasn't just an attorney, but the fixer. Hope Hicks saying he sometimes broke things to fix them, but he was the fixer. What type of tone do you think we're going to see tomorrow? Will it be similar to that?
I think that he'll try to be contrite, but I think that they're going to bait him on cross-examination. Trump's lawyers will. And I think that he perceives that he should not be angry, that wearing that T-shirt was a mistake. I think they'll try to emphasize all the pre-corroboration of his testimony. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down on this issue of whether Trump knew and specifically intended to violate campaign finance laws. He's going to imply in his closing arguments, Trump, well, they haven't proven it beyond a reasonable doubt. Michael Cohen had his own reasons. He got compensated 3 or 4 times what he actually reimbursed her. They'll say legal expenses. There were legal expenses. He spent a lot of time, Michael Cohen did, lawyering this. And on top of that, he'll come back to the theme. He didn't want his wife and his family to find out. There was the shame that was involved. And that was what the overriding concern, at least that the prosecution cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt, that that was not his concern. You have 2 reasonable hypotheses in our system of justice. That means a not guilty verdict, at least on the felony. It's at least a possibility. I think people have to contend with the fact it's going to be quite a rousing cross-examination. If they think Stormy Daniels was something, this will really be, the zenith. And then the closing arguments will be just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you for watching. Please go to newsnationnow.com, newsnationnow.com, And you can find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button down below. Then you will get more of News Nation's fact-driven coverage.